The pill in Saturday evening's compartment was wrong. Not dramatically wrong. Nothing that would make a man drop the box and shout for help. Under the warm pendant lights in my son's kitchen, it simply looked a shade paler than the tablets I'd been taking for months, and the tiny imprint seemed a little sharper against my thumb. Behind me, ice rattled into glasses. Somebody laughed near the patio doors. The kitchen smelled of smoked brisket, bourbon, and Ashley's expensive vanilla candles. "Dean, you haven't taken your evening pill," Marianne said beside me. "I know." My wife touched my wrist. "Then take it before Lucas starts another toast." At 57, I still ran Holloway Construction 5 days a week and made a living noticing things that didn't fit. A beam out of line. A subcontractor's number that changed between pages. Yet in my son's crowded new kitchen, I almost swallowed that pill. Almost. "Dad," Lucas called from the great room. "Come on. You're the reason half these people showed up." I closed the compartment instead. After the toast, Marianne slipped the organizer into her purse. "Don't forget." Lucas appeared in the doorway holding 2 champagne flutes. His navy jacket fit him like he'd been sewn into it, and his smile was the same one he'd used at 12 when he'd broken a garage window and wanted me to admire his baseball swing instead. "Medication at my housewarming?" he said. "You're making me feel old. You'll survive. That's the plan." Lucas gave a quick laugh and handed me one of the flutes. "Come meet Tom Riley. He's been asking about the next phase at Holloway." "The next phase of what?" My son had already turned away. "You'll see." That phrase followed me into the great room. The house was built to impress before anyone asked what it cost. 20-foot windows faced the foothills, and caterers moved among lenders, developers, and project managers. I recognized enough faces to know this wasn't just a family party. Tom Riley, one of our longtime lenders, shook my hand. "Dean, good to see you out enjoying yourself." "Out?" Tom's mouth paused before his smile returned. "Lucas says you're finally ready to slow down a little." I looked toward my son. Lucas was speaking to 2 of our senior managers near the bar. "Did he?" Tom cleared his throat. "Nothing wrong with taking a little time. You've earned it." For years, people had asked when Holloway Construction would become Lucas's company. My answer was always the same. When he was ready, we'd talk. I hadn't realized my son had begun answering for me. Ashley tapped a spoon against her glass. The room softened to murmurs. "My husband wants to say a few words," she announced. Lucas stepped beside her and lifted his champagne. "First, thank you all for coming. Ashley and I wanted this house to be more than a place to live. We wanted it to mark a new chapter." His eyes found mine. "And Dad, I hope you'll finally let yourself enjoy what you built instead of trying to carry it forever." A few people laughed gently. Others raised their glasses. I didn't. Lucas came down from the fireplace as conversation started again. "You could smile, Dad." I was listening. "Same thing with you, apparently." He pressed another flute toward me because I had set the first one on a side table. "Come on. One drink." Before my fingers closed around the stem, Marianne stepped between us. "Don't." Lucas blinked. "Mom?" Her hand closed around my wrist, hard enough that her wedding ring pressed into my skin. With the other hand, she took the glass from me. "Marianne," I said quietly, "don't drink anything." The words barely carried over the music, but Lucas heard them. His smile changed by a fraction. "What is this?" "We're leaving," Marianne said. Ashley approached from behind him. Her perfume reached us before her voice did. "Leaving? We haven't even cut the cake." Marianne still held my champagne. "Dean isn't feeling well." I turned toward her. I didn't say that. Her fingers tightened once. Lucas glanced past us toward the guests, then lowered his voice. "Dad, don't make this weird." That stopped me. "What did you say?" "People are watching." My son's teeth stayed visible, but the smile had gone out of his voice. "Mom said you weren't feeling right. Just go home and get some rest." Marianne hadn't said that to him. Not once. I looked at my wife. She was already moving toward the foyer, the untouched flute steady in her hand. "Dean. Now, 34 years of marriage teaches you which arguments can wait." I followed. Our shoes struck the polished floor harder than I wanted. Behind us, Music rose again, then a burst of laughter covered whatever Lucas said to Ashley. Marianne didn't stop for my coat. She handed the flute to me long enough to dig through the coat room, then took it back without letting anyone touch it. Outside, the September air had cooled, gravel scraped under my shoes. A car door slammed somewhere down the block, and from inside the mansion came another round of applause. "What happened upstairs?" I asked. "Get in the car, Marianne, please." That word did it. She rarely used it with me. Once we were inside, Marianne placed the champagne flute upright in the cup holder, locked the doors, and pulled out her phone. The screen lit her hands. They weren't steady now. "I went upstairs looking for the powder room," she said. "The downstairs one had a line. I heard Lucas in the office." "So?" "I heard your name." My phone buzzed in my pocket. "Lucas." I reached for it. Marianne caught my forearm. "No. If he said something about me, I'll ask him. Listen first." She opened a recording. At first there was only muffled music coming through a wall, then the scrape of a chair. A man's voice came through the speaker. "Lucas, once the old man's gone, the insurance, company, and house are ours." My hand stopped on the door handle. Another voice answered, quieter and harder to place through the phone speaker. "The dose is ready." Something tapped against wood. "Glass, maybe." Lucas laughed. Footsteps and party noise swallowed the next few seconds. Marianne stopped it. "Play it again." "Dean." Again. This time I listened past my son's words. A chair shifted. Someone breathed near Marianne's phone. Then Lucas came through clearly again. "Once the old man's gone." I looked at the champagne flute between us. Marianne followed my eyes. "That's why I took it." The voice, after Lucas. "Was that Ashley?" "I don't know. You saw who was in the office?" "No. The door was mostly closed. I heard your name, started recording, and stood outside long enough to get that." My phone buzzed again. "Lucas." Then a text appeared. "Mom said you weren't feeling right. Call me when you get home." I read it twice. "Did you tell him that?" "No." "Did you tell Ashley?" "No." Marianne reached into her purse and set my pill organizer on the center console. For a moment, neither of us touched it. "How long have you had that tonight?" I asked. "Since you handed it to me in the kitchen. And before that?" "It was in your jacket pocket. You packed it." I usually filled the organizer myself at our kitchen counter. Usually. My thumb hovered over Saturday. "Don't open it," she said. "I already opened it inside." "Then don't touch anything else." I picked up my phone. Lucas's name still filled the screen. Waiting. My first impulse was simple. Call him. Drive back up that circular driveway. Make my son explain those words in front of every lender and executive inside. Instead, I scrolled to another name. Daniel Mercer had been my corporate attorney long enough to know I didn't call him on Saturday nights to chat. He answered on the fourth ring. "Dean, I need you to listen to something." Daniel was quiet while Marianne played the recording through my phone. When it ended, he didn't curse. He didn't tell me to confront Lucas, and he didn't tell me what the words meant. "Are you both somewhere safe?" he asked. "We're in the car. Stay away from the house for now. Don't accuse anyone. Don't throw anything away. Don't wash that glass. And don't start sorting through anything you think might be evidence." My eyes dropped to the organizer. Daniel's voice sharpened slightly. "Dean, where are your medications right now?" Marianne set the box between us. The Saturday compartment was open, and the pill I had almost swallowed was still inside. "Don't touch that pill," Daniel said. Marianne's hand stopped inches above the organizer. We were still parked outside Lucas's house. Through the windshield, I could see guests moving behind the tall windows. Little shadows crossing rooms where my son was probably explaining why his parents had left without dessert. The champagne flute sat in our cup holder. Its stem clicked softly against the plastic whenever a car passed. "What do you want us to do?" I asked. "First, go somewhere Lucas won't expect you to be tonight," Daniel said. "Second, keep the glass upright. Don't rinse it. Don't pour anything out. Put the pill organizer somewhere it won't be handled, and write down what happened while it's fresh." Marianne looked toward the mansion. We should call the police. Maybe, Daniel said, but a recording with ugly language and an unidentified voice isn't the same thing as knowing a crime occurred. Dean also needs to be examined. I'm sitting right here, I said. That's why I'm telling you directly. Get checked. Daniel had a way of making caution sound less like fear and more like a job that needed doing. We drove to a hotel near Cherry Creek instead of going home. Marianne carried the flute inside in a rigid drink carrier the hotel clerk found for us, while I kept the organizer sealed in a small toiletry case. In our room, we wrote the sequence down separately, then compared notes. At 11:48, Lucas called. I put him on speaker. Dad, where are you? Why? A pause. Because you walked out of my house like somebody pulled a fire alarm. Marianne sat across from me at the desk, her pen motionless. Lucas continued. Mom said you weren't feeling right. Is this another spell? The word landed harder than his accusation upstairs. Another what? I asked. You know what I mean. No. Say it. My son exhaled into the phone. The dizzy thing. The confusion. Whatever happened at the warehouse. I'm asking if you're okay. I looked at Marianne. She shook her head once. Who told you I was sick tonight? I asked. Mom did. She didn't. Another pause. Then Lucas gave a small laugh. Dad, you're doing that thing where you turn a simple question into a deposition. You called it another spell. I've seen you off lately. Everyone has. Who's everyone? Get some sleep. The line went dead. Marianne lowered her eyes to the legal pad and wrote 2 words beneath the time of the call. Another spell. Neither of us slept much. By Sunday morning, Daniel had arranged for us to meet him and a physician at an urgent evaluation clinic affiliated with a hospital system. He did not take possession of the glass himself. A staff member documented what Marianne had carried, how she had kept it, and when it had left her control. The organizer was handled separately. The exam room smelled of disinfectant and burnt coffee drifting in from the nurse's station. A blood pressure cuff squeezed my arm, while Dr. Patel asked questions I wanted to dismiss. Any recent dizziness? Some. Marianne shifted in the chair beside me. Dr. Patel looked up. How often is some? I rubbed the paper edge of the exam table between my fingers. 3 times I remember clearly. Maybe 4. Loss of consciousness? No. Falls? No. I caught myself once at work. Trouble concentrating? I started to say no. Then I remembered an email I had sent to Evelyn Price, our chief financial officer, asking for a cost report I had already approved 2 days earlier. Yes. The doctor kept writing. A month earlier, I had stood in our garage holding my keys and staring at the wrong car door for several seconds before realizing Marianne had taken her SUV and mine was parked behind me. At a restaurant, I had forgotten a reservation I had made myself. None of those moments had seemed large enough to connect. Now, Lucas had a name for them. Another spell. Initial blood work gave us numbers. Not an answer. Nothing on the first round explained the pattern cleanly, and Dr. Patel refused to guess. If something was taken days or weeks ago, routine testing today may not tell us what happened then, he said. We document what we can document. We don't manufacture certainty. Daniel nodded. That's exactly what I need Dean to understand. I looked at him. I understand English. Good, Daniel said. Then understand this too. Don't accuse Lucas of poisoning you, because you heard the word dose. For the first time since the party, Marianne almost smiled. Almost. 2 days later, the first screening information on the remaining drink came back through the appropriate testing channel Daniel had helped us locate. We met in his office Tuesday afternoon. Rain tapped lightly against the windows, and a copier hummed behind the closed conference room door. Daniel slid a page toward me. What did they find? I asked. No suspicious substance was detected in the remaining sample under the screening performed. Marianne leaned forward. So the champagne was clean. Daniel raised one finger. Don't say that. She sat back. The result tells us they didn't detect something suspicious in the sample they tested, he said. It does not prove nothing was ever introduced. It does not prove the glass was never touched. It does not tell us what Lucas meant by dose. I read the line again. For 2 days, that champagne flute had been the simplest answer in the room. Lucas talked about my death. Someone said the dose was ready. Lucas handed me a drink. Simple. Now the straight line bent. My phone rang on the conference table. Evelyn Price. I answered. Evelyn. Dean. Are you alone? I'm with Marianne and Daniel. Fine. Then I'm only going to say this once. Evelyn had spent 19 years at Holloway Construction and never wasted words when one would do. Lucas called me this morning, she said. He asked whether major approvals should be routed away from you for a few days. My fingers tightened around the phone. On whose authority? That was my question. What did he say? He said you had another health episode Saturday night and that Marianne took you home. Marianne pushed back from the table. The chair legs scraped the floor. Evelyn continued. He also said we need to protect the company from uncertainty. Did you change anything? No. Did he ask before Saturday? A brief silence. Not exactly, Evelyn said. But he's asked me twice this month whether we have a current continuity plan if you become unavailable. Daniel reached for a pen. I said, send him nothing, change nothing. If he asks again, tell him you're following existing authority. Already did. When the call ended, the room felt smaller. Marianne stared at the dark screen of my phone. He was talking about your health before the party. Yes. And he knew about the warehouse. I turned toward her. So did you. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, Marianne opened her purse and pulled out a folded sheet from a small notebook. The paper had been creased so many times the center was going soft. What is that? I started writing things down. When? August. She unfolded it. A dinner reservation I had forgotten. The duplicate email to Evelyn. The morning in the garage. The warehouse incident. With the date beside it. A note about me falling asleep in my chair before 8 one evening, and another about asking the same question twice over breakfast. I read the list without speaking. Every item was real. That was the part I couldn't argue with. You thought something was wrong with me, I said. Marianne pressed her thumb along the edge of the paper. I thought something might be. And Lucas knew? He knew about some of it. How? Her eyes moved toward her purse again. This time, she took out a document folded inside a white envelope. 3 weeks ago, Lucas brought me this, she said. Daniel held out his hand, but Marianne gave the pages to me first. At the top was Holloway Construction's name. Below it were words I had never seen attached to my own name before. Leadership Continuity Acknowledgement. I turned the first page, then the second. The dates on the document reached back into the same weeks Marianne had been keeping her private list. Then I reached the last page. Marianne's signature was already there. Why did you sign this? Marianne did not reach for the document. She sat across from me in Daniel's conference room with both hands around a paper cup she had stopped drinking from. Because I was worried about you. You were worried, so you signed something Lucas brought you about removing me from my own company. That isn't what it says. You knew I hadn't seen it. Yes. The single word hit harder than an excuse would have. Daniel took the pages from me. Let me read it before either of you decides what it means. He worked through the document while I watched Marianne. 34 years of marriage had given us plenty of arguments, but very few secrets that came with my company letterhead. Daniel finally laid the pages flat. This does not transfer shares, he said. It does not appoint Lucas chief executive. It does not declare you incapacitated. Then what did she sign? Acknowledgement that Marianne observed several incidents and would support a medical review if they continued. Your bylaws still require an appropriate medical determination before the board can activate the incapacity provision. Marianne looked at me. That's what Lucas told me, and you believed him. I believed what I saw. The room went quiet. She opened the folded list again and pushed it toward me. You forgot the dinner reservation. You sent Evelyn the same request twice. You nearly fell at the warehouse. You asked me where your keys were while they were in your hand. I remember. No, Dean. You remember now because I wrote them down. That landed. Marianne's voice lowered. Every time I asked whether you were okay, you said you were tired, or busy, or that I was watching you too closely. Lucas said, "We needed a plan in case something happened at work." He didn't ask me to give him the company. He asked you to help build a case. I didn't know that. Neither did I. That's the problem. She stood so quickly the coffee trembled in her cup. You think I enjoyed wondering whether my husband was forgetting things? You think I wanted our son to be the one person willing to say it out loud? Daniel leaned back and let us finish. Marianne wiped a drop of coffee from her thumb. If you want to be angry, be angry. But don't rewrite what happened, because what we heard Saturday makes everything uglier now. I looked at the dates on her list. She was right about one thing. Those incidents had happened before the recording, before either of us had reason to treat Lucas as an enemy. What else haven't you told me? I asked. Nothing. Nothing you signed? Nothing. Nothing Lucas showed you? Her answer came slower. He showed me a few dates. He said people at work had noticed things too. Daniel sat forward. What people? He didn't name them. That sounded more like Lucas. Give someone enough truth to make the conclusion feel like their own. Daniel turned the document toward me. There's another issue. This form uses the company's continuity language, but it doesn't create authority by itself. Holloway Construction has 5 board members. If a physician appropriately determined you were unable to perform your duties, the board could use temporary management safeguards. Under the bylaws, that still wouldn't change who owns the company. I owned 68% of the voting shares. Marianne owned 12%. Lucas had 5% from a transfer program I had approved years earlier. I could become sick, retire, or spend a month on a fishing boat and Lucas still would not wake up owning Holloway Construction. That distinction mattered because Lucas had spent years sitting in meetings where ownership and management were discussed separately. He knew the difference. So what does he gain? Marianne asked. Influence, Daniel said. Control of operations. Possibly, if the board believed it was necessary and chose him for an interim role. Access. Credibility. But not ownership by magic. The word from the recording returned anyway. Company. Lucas had not said control. He had said ours. Daniel tapped the paper. I want Evelyn to tell us whether Lucas has been doing anything inside the company to prepare for this. I called her before we left. She answered from her office. Evelyn, has Lucas asked for records about me? Silence lasted just long enough to answer the question. What kind of records? She asked. Missed meetings, corrected emails, decisions somebody thought were inconsistent. Anything tied to my health. I need to check. That means yes. It means I remember requests I didn't like. When? Over the last few weeks. For what purpose? He called it succession risk review. I stood and walked toward the conference room window. Did I authorize one? No. Did the board? Not that I know of. Daniel held out his hand for the phone. I switched to speaker. Evelyn continued. He asked an assistant to pull calendar changes. He asked operations about the warehouse incident. I stopped a request for personnel comments because it was vague. What warehouse incident? Daniel asked. The one where Dean got dizzy on the mezzanine stairs. I remembered the metal railing under my palm and the concrete floor 2 stories below. Lucas had been 10 feet away. He had taken my elbow and told everyone I had skipped lunch. Then, another memory surfaced. That morning had started with a yellow cost report on Evelyn's desk. I remembered circling one line with my pen, then telling her I wanted the original backup before I signed anything else from that vendor. Evelyn, what was I doing that morning? Before the stairs? Yes. Keyboard clicks came through the speaker. You met with me at 9. About? More clicking. A subcontractor invoice on the Aurora Medical Office project. I could see the page now. A concrete package with a margin that had looked wrong. You said the number had moved between the preliminary cost report and the final approval, Evelyn said. You asked me to pull the supporting invoices. Did you? I started to. Then you had the incident. You were out the rest of that afternoon, and the next week was the Springs project review. Did I ever follow up? No. A dull pressure settled behind my eyes. One suspicious invoice did not prove anything. A dizzy spell after asking about it proved even less. Construction accounting produced strange numbers every week, and most of them had boring explanations: change orders, delayed credits, materials posted to the wrong phase. But Lucas supervised development and vendor relationships. That meant the question had crossed his desk before it reached mine. It was the first time one of my health episodes had touched something he controlled. Daniel wrote the project name on his pad. "Don't investigate it yet," he told Evelyn. "Preserve what exists. We'll decide the next step after Dean's medical and medication questions are clearer." Understood. After the call, Marianne touched my sleeve. "Dean, I'm fine." She gave me a look. I almost laughed at the stupidity of my answer. "Bad choice of words," I said. For the first time since Saturday, her shoulders dropped a fraction. We left Daniel's office with an agreement that felt more like terms than reconciliation. No hiding documents. No private promises to Lucas. No accusations we could not support. In the elevator, Marianne stood beside me without touching my hand. "I should have told you," she said. "Yes." "You should have told me how often you were getting dizzy." "Yes." The doors opened. Neither apology fixed the other one. It was enough that both were finally on the table. The pill organizer had already been transferred for proper comparison and testing, but Daniel had arranged for us to review the prescription information and photographs taken during intake. In the image, Saturday's remaining tablet sat beside the medication it was supposed to match. Under bright clinical light, the difference was easier to see. The prescribed tablets shown from the labeled bottle shared the same shape and marking. Saturday's tablet did not. The imprint was wrong. Marianne leaned closer. "That isn't his prescription." Daniel stopped her. "It appears different. Let the lab establish what it is." I stared at the photograph. For the first time, the recording, my recent lapses, and that little plastic box occupied the same line in my head. Not proof, a line. My phone vibrated. An email from Evelyn had arrived, forwarded from Lucas. The subject read, "Temporary approval routing." I opened it. "Until Dad's health is clarified. Please route major operational approvals through me so we can avoid unnecessary exposure. No board vote. No authorization from me. No hesitation." Marianne read over my shoulder. Daniel was already reaching for his phone when another message appeared beneath the first. Lucas had copied the senior management team. "Take me off the approvals and see what happens." Daniel looked up from my phone. That is exactly the reaction Lucas is hoping for. We were still standing near the elevator when Evelyn called again. By the time I reached Holloway Construction the next morning, Lucas's email had already done its work. My assistant met me outside the executive conference room holding a contract folder. "Evelyn asked me to bring this directly to you." "Why wouldn't you?" She hesitated. "Lucas told procurement, anything over a certain amount should go through him first." I opened the folder. A mechanical subcontract for one of our medical projects had a yellow routing slip clipped to the front. My name was still printed under final approval. Someone had handwritten Lucas above it. I carried the folder into Evelyn's office. She had 3 screens open and a legal pad covered in vendor names. "I've found 4 approvals that were redirected since Monday. Signed, not by Lucas. He hasn't crossed that line. Yet." Evelyn folded her arms. "What do you want changed?" "I wanted Lucas's badge dead, his email locked, and his office emptied before lunch." Instead, I called Daniel. Within an hour, we had a narrower answer. New vendor creation required dual approval. Changes to vendor banking information required dual approval. Large contracts and unusual transfers could no longer move on Lucas's authority alone. Existing project work continued, so I did not freeze the company to punish one man. The distinction mattered. Hundreds of employees still had payroll coming. Crews still needed concrete, steel, inspections, and signed change orders. If I shut down every process Lucas had touched, I would create the instability he was already telling people I caused. "Preserve everything before anyone gets cute," I told Evelyn. Already started. She had information technology create protected exports of vendor records, approval histories, emails, and accounting logs tied to Lucas's division. That mattered more than making a scene. Lucas walked into my office before noon and shut the door behind him. "No meeting invite?" he asked. "You seem comfortable changing procedure without one." He sat without being asked. "If this is about the email, I was trying to keep things moving. You told people to route my approvals through you. I told them to use judgment. You used my health to give yourself authority you don't have." His jaw shifted. "Dad, you nearly went down a warehouse staircase. I got dizzy. You forgot a meeting. One meeting. You sent Evelyn duplicate instructions. You've been collecting quite a list." Lucas leaned back. Somebody had to notice. The sentence was soft, almost caring. I slid the rerouted contract across the desk. "Did I authorize this?" "No." "Did the board?" "No." "Then don't do it again." His eyes stayed on the yellow slip. "You think being majority owner means nobody can question you. It means you don't get to invent authority because questioning me is convenient." Lucas stood. "What happened Saturday?" "You tell me." His face changed just enough to show he had heard the edge in my voice. "Mom dragged you out of my house, in front of half the people we do business with. Now you come in and lock down vendor controls. If you're trying to prove you're fine, this is a strange way to do it. Those controls should have been tighter already. Because of me. Because good controls don't care whose last name is on the office door." For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then Lucas smiled without showing his teeth. "Be careful, Dad. If you start treating everyone like they're stealing from you, people may wonder what else is going on." He left the door open behind him. By mid-afternoon, Evelyn brought me the first preserved reports. We started with the Aurora Medical Office project because I had questioned one of its invoices before the warehouse incident. The conference room table disappeared under cost reports, subcontract agreements, change orders, and payment histories. Evelyn pointed to a concrete subcontractor. Original scope was ordinary. Then the change orders started. "How much movement?" "Enough to matter. Not enough to scream by itself." One invoice billed equipment standby on dates our site log showed active work. Another charged a mobilization fee twice under slightly different descriptions. "Sloppy?" I asked. "Could be." "Fraud?" "Could be." I looked at her. Evelyn shrugged. "You pay me to know the difference before I accuse somebody." That was why she had lasted 19 years. We widened the sample. The same pattern appeared on 2 more projects. Lucas supervised through vendor relationships. Not identical amounts. Not cartoonishly inflated bills. Small layers. Extra consulting. Duplicate mobilization. Change orders that sat just below the level that usually drew executive attention. I had built Holloway Construction by distrusting numbers that were almost reasonable. An absurd charge gets challenged. A charge that looks merely annoying gets approved at 4:30 on a Friday. Stack enough of those together, and annoyance becomes real money. A person could hide inside boring paperwork for a long time. The question was whether Lucas had hidden anything there, or whether I was forcing his name onto every irregularity because of what Marianne had recorded. "Who approved these vendors?" I asked. "Different project managers on the operational side." "And onboarding?" Evelyn clicked through the preserved history. "Lucas's division." There it was again. Not proof. A line. I rubbed my eyes and stopped when I noticed Evelyn watching. "What?" "Nothing. Don't start." I didn't say anything. "That's worse." She turned the screen toward me. "Then look at this instead." One vendor had received payments across several projects, despite having an address that matched a small office suite used by multiple registered businesses. What do they actually do? According to the file, project consulting and specialty procurement. Employees? I'm checking. Equipment? Nothing obvious. Insurance certificates? Yes, but I want them verified. Daniel joined us late that afternoon. He did not let me call the vendor. He did not let Evelyn contact anyone connected to Lucas's private development either. "Preserve first," he said. "Understand second. Confront last." I already confronted Lucas. You confronted him about approvals. Keep it there. Evelyn opened another record. "This is what bothers me more. A payment from one suspicious vendor had moved onward through an entity whose name I recognized. North Range Development Holdings. I stared at it. Lucas had used that company for a private development deal the year before. He had told me months ago that he and his partners had exited the project. I thought North Range was done. So did I, Evelyn said. Daniel leaned closer. Is Holloway Construction supposed to have any financial relationship with it? No. Could there be a legitimate one? Maybe. Lucas has brought private development contacts into company projects before. That doesn't make every transaction dirty. Daniel nodded. Good. Keep saying maybe until the records stop giving you that option. Evelyn pulled the Colorado registration information and matched it against our vendor files. The connection was indirect. No giant transfer labeled money stolen from Dad. Just entities, payments, and people touching the same network. Enough to keep looking, not enough to move. I asked Evelyn how far back the North Range connection went. She found the first overlap earlier that year, months before my recent health episodes. That did not answer whether the two problems were connected. It did tell me the money question had a history of its own. That evening, I stood at the window of my office while most of the floor emptied. Lucas's door across the hall was closed. Light still showed beneath it. My phone buzzed with a text from Marianne. Are you coming home? Soon, I typed. Then Evelyn called from the conference room. Dean, you need to see one more thing. She had an invoice enlarged on the screen. The vendor name was Summit Project Advisory. Same network? I asked. Possibly. What's special about this one? They've been paid hundreds of thousands across the projects we sampled. For what? That's the problem. Evelyn clicked through the vendor file. A mailing address, insurance paperwork, tax forms, consulting descriptions. Then she opened the employment and operational verification she had been able to assemble from our own onboarding records and ordinary business checks. No listed field crews. No equipment schedule. No project staff assigned in our site records. No meaningful operating footprint that matched the work they had billed us for. Evelyn tapped the invoice with one finger. This vendor is charging us like a functioning subcontractor. I looked at the total again. She turned toward me. I can't find the people who supposedly did the work. If Summit has no people, what exactly have we been paying for? Evelyn did not answer until she had closed the conference room door. That is what I intend to find out. Over the next several days, she and the forensic accountant worked from the records already preserved. I stayed out of their way, unless they needed a decision. The temptation to sit over their shoulders was strong. So was the temptation to walk across the hall and ask Lucas why a company with almost no visible operating footprint had collected hundreds of thousands of dollars from projects under his division. Daniel had given me one instruction I could not misunderstand. Do not outrun the evidence. So I went to work as if nothing had changed. I reviewed schedules. I signed ordinary contracts. I walked a project meeting without Lucas and made myself ask questions at the same pace I always had. Every time someone watched me a second too long after I paused, I wondered whether they had heard his version of Saturday. By Friday afternoon, Evelyn placed a flowchart on the table between us. Summit received payments from 3 Holloway projects, she said. Some of that money moved through other entities. One path reaches a company connected to North Range Development Holdings. How much? 1. Across the suspicious vendor group we have identified so far, about $840,000 moved through questionable invoices and related transfers. Marianne sat beside me. All to Lucas? No, Evelyn said. And we should not say that. Some money paid legitimate expenses. Some moved through entities we are still identifying. What matters is that company funds entered a network tied to a private development Lucas controls. Daniel pointed to one box on the chart. And the development? Evelyn turned another page. Still alive. Lucas had told me the opposite. North Range was carrying roughly $2,600,000 in exposure through loans, guarantees, unfinished obligations, and partner claims. A lender deadline was approaching later in the year. I leaned back. His project is drowning. Evelyn capped her pen. It is certainly not the successful exit he described. That evening, Daniel walked us through public property records and financing information on Lucas and Ashley's mansion. The house had cost about $3,400,000. A large mortgage explained part of it. The down payment and liquidity behind the purchase traced partly to Lucas-controlled entities. His salary and bonus were substantial, about $320,000 a year, enough to live well. Not enough to make a failing development, a mortgage, and that housewarming look effortless. I thought about the catered bar, the imported stone, the valet line curling down the street. None of those things proved a crime. They proved something simpler. Lucas had built a life that required the appearance of momentum. Losing his title at Holloway would not only cut income, it would tell lenders and partners that I no longer trusted him. Marianne stared at the property information. At the party, Ashley told someone they had built all of this without needing Dean's money. She may believe that, I said. Marianne gave me a look. You don't. I believe debt can dress better than cash. She folded her arms, then went still. What? Ashley asked me about your pharmacy. Daniel looked up. When? A few weeks ago. We were having lunch. She said their pharmacy had a delivery service and asked whether you were still using the same place. Why would that come up? I asked. Because I complained about waiting for one of your refills. She said we should switch. It didn't sound strange. It would not have sounded strange to me either. That was the problem with details after Betrayal. Every ordinary sentence wanted to become evidence. Daniel wrote it down anyway. Context matters, he said. We keep it as context. The medication report arrived the following week. We met Dr. Patel in a small consultation room. He placed the report on the desk, but kept one hand over it while he spoke. The tablet from your organizer does not match the medication prescribed to you. Marianne's fingers closed around mine under the table. What was it? I asked. He gave us the clinical identification, then immediately pulled the conversation away from the name. What matters for you is that this medication, used inappropriately, can be associated with drowsiness, impaired concentration, confusion, and balance problems. The things that happened to me, compatible with them, he said. That is not the same as proving it caused every event. How many times would I have had to take it? I cannot answer that from one tablet. Could routine blood work from days later prove I took it before? Not reliably in the way you want. I hated the answer because it was careful. Careful was useful in courtrooms and useless when a man wanted to know whether his son had been feeding him something from a plastic box. Dr. Patel opened the symptom chronology Marianne and I had built. Late July, August, early September. Your reported episodes are intermittent, he said. That can fit many explanations. We document the medication discrepancy. We document the symptoms. We do not connect them beyond what the evidence supports. Outside, Marianne and I sat in the car without starting it. One wrong pill, she said. One we found. She turned toward me. Neither of us finished the next thought. Marianne reached for the ignition, then stopped. Do you remember who had access to the organizer? Us. Lucas has been in the house. So has Ashley. So has the cleaning service. So have friends. She nodded. Then we don't pick the answer because we hate it. At home, we laid the calendar across the dining table. Marianne had dates for the restaurant, the garage, the warehouse, the early evening when I had fallen asleep in my chair, and the breakfast when I repeated a question. I added the days I remembered refilling or reorganizing medication. The pattern was imperfect. Some dates did not line up neatly. Some I could not reconstruct at all. That made me trust the page more, not less. Real life rarely arranged itself into courtroom exhibits. Then I noticed something. The warehouse episode had happened after a Sunday refill. So had the duplicate email incident. Marianne pointed to another date. You were unusually tired here. I had been at a job site all day. I know. We left it unmarked. No forcing the pattern. No inventing certainty. My phone rang. Lucas. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, Marianne's phone buzzed with a message from Ashley asking whether we were coming to dinner Sunday. Marianne read it and set the phone face down. She acts like nothing happened. Maybe that's the point. Daniel called later with another warning. Do not combine the financial records and medication report into one accusation yet, he said. You have a financial problem you can document. You have a medication discrepancy you can document. The bridge between them is still being built. I know. Say it back. I hate lawyers. That will do. The next morning, the bridge became harder to ignore. Evelyn sent me an older email I had written in late July. I had asked her to review a vendor cost increase on another project. 2 days later, according to Marianne's notes, I had come home early because I could not keep my eyes open. Again, correlation. Nothing more. But I finally understood what had been bothering me about the housewarming recording. I had assumed the words "the dose is ready" meant somebody planned to put something in my drink that night. The champagne screening had weakened that assumption. The pill in my organizer changed the question. What if the party was not the beginning? What if Saturday was simply the night Lucas expected all the earlier pieces to matter? Weeks of real mistakes. A wife worried enough to sign a continuity acknowledgement. Employees hearing that I had spells. A son collecting dates. If I suffered a medical emergency after that history, people would not begin with sabotage. They would begin with me. And if I did not die, the same history could still be useful. A board could question my judgment. Clients could ask who was really in charge. Senior managers could start routing around me because it felt safer than challenging Lucas. He did not need one dramatic event if a dozen smaller ones could make the company move away from me by inches. I looked across the kitchen at Marianne. He didn't need me dead first. She said nothing. He needed everyone to stop believing me. My laptop chimed. An email from the corporate secretary had arrived. At the request of Lucas Holloway, a special meeting of the board had been scheduled to discuss leadership continuity and temporary executive safeguards. I read the date. Lucas was no longer waiting for my next episode. You asked for this meeting because you think I can't do my job? Lucas did not answer me. He looked toward the other 4 board members seated around the conference table. The special meeting began at 9 on Monday morning. Evelyn sat along the wall with Daniel and outside corporate counsel. Marianne had been invited because her signed acknowledgement was part of Lucas's materials. Nobody looked comfortable, which was the first reassuring thing about the room. Robert Keene, our lead independent director, folded his hands. This meeting is not about ownership, he said. It is not a finding that Dean is incapacitated. We are here to determine whether temporary operational safeguards are appropriate while medical questions are being evaluated. Agreed, I said. Lucas opened a black binder. Then I'd like the board to see why I requested it. He began with facts. That was what made it effective. An email I had sent Evelyn twice. A meeting moved because I had written the wrong time in my calendar. The restaurant reservation had no place in a corporate review, so Lucas left it out. He had learned restraint somewhere. Then came the warehouse footage. On the conference room screen, I watched myself stop on the mezzanine stairs. One hand caught the rail. My shoulders dipped. Lucas stepped into frame and grabbed my arm. No sound, no context. Just a 57-year-old chief executive who suddenly looked older. Robert asked, "How long did that episode last?" "Less than a minute," I said. Lucas turned a page. "Dad left work afterward. Because you insisted. You could barely walk straight." I was dizzy. "That is what we're discussing." Another director, Helen Ward, raised her palm. "Lucas, we are not diagnosing your father." "I'm not trying to." His voice was measured, respectful. The version of my son sitting across from me was the one lenders liked. He passed copies of a chronology around the table. Late July, August, early September, dates, times, mistakes, people present. I recognized nearly every entry. Lucas had not invented my weakness. He had cataloged it. Then he placed Marianne's continuity acknowledgement on top. I heard her chair move behind me. Robert looked at her. "Mrs. Holloway, do you stand by your signature?" Marianne's answer came without hesitation. "I stand by what I knew when I signed it." Lucas looked at me. Robert asked, "And what did you know?" "That Dean had several episodes I could not explain. I was worried about him." "Are you still?" Marianne took a breath. "I'm worried about different things now." But I won't tell you I never had concerns, just because that would be easier for my husband. Nobody spoke for a moment. I could have hated her for that sentence. Instead, I trusted it. If Marianne had suddenly declared every incident meaningless, Lucas could have dismissed her as a wife protecting her husband. She gave him no such gift. Helen Ward turned to me. Dean, has a physician cleared you without qualification? No. Has a physician found you incapable of performing your duties? No. Are you still under evaluation? Yes. Lucas leaned forward. That uncertainty is exactly why we need interim leadership. Interim leadership by whom? I asked. He did not say himself. Someone who can keep decisions moving. Robert closed the binder. We already have management. Lucas's mouth tightened. I could have brought up the altered pill, the recording, the financial records Evelyn was preserving. I could have told them my son had discussed my death upstairs while somebody said a dose was ready. Daniel had warned me what would happen if I mixed an unresolved criminal suspicion into a governance meeting. Lucas had facts the board could verify. I had facts too, but not all of them belonged in this room yet. So I swallowed the speech I wanted to give. I'll accept temporary dual signatures on major commitments while the medical review continues, I said. Lucas turned toward me. I continued. Independent review. Not routing through Lucas. Existing executives keep their authority. No change in ownership. No transfer of my chief executive title. Robert nodded slowly. Helen asked, for how long? Until the medical review gives us enough to reassess. Lucas tapped his binder. That doesn't address day-to-day uncertainty. It addresses risk, Robert said. Which is our job. The board approved temporary safeguards, not Lucas as chief executive, not me removed. But my signature would no longer stand alone on certain major decisions. For the first time since I founded Holloway Construction, my board had placed a guardrail around me. That hurt more than I expected. When the vote was recorded, Robert asked me to remain for the next item. I watched the corporate secretary write the decision into the minutes. Nobody celebrated. Nobody apologized. The board had done exactly what a responsible board was supposed to do when it could not yet tell whether its chief executive had a medical problem. Knowing that did not make the ink easier to look at. The meeting should have ended there. It did not. Evelyn's phone buzzed. She read the message, then asked Robert for permission to speak. One of our major clients wants written assurance regarding executive continuity before releasing the next phase of a project. I looked at her. Why? Their representative says Lucas told them last week that we were working through a leadership health issue. Every face turned toward him. Lucas spread his hands. They asked whether Dad was okay. You discussed my health with a client? I asked. I reassured them. You created the question. They saw you leave the warehouse. That client wasn't at the warehouse. Silence. Lucas looked at Evelyn. People talk. There it was. The rumor had not floated into the company by accident. It had been carried. Robert's voice hardened. No director or officer discusses unresolved medical issues with clients unless authorized. Is that understood? Yes, Lucas said. The reprimand was small compared with what I wanted. The damage was not. After the meeting, I found Lucas waiting near the elevators. You got your safeguards, he said. They aren't yours. You still think this is about me taking your chair. I think you've spent weeks telling people I can't sit in it. He stepped closer. Mom saw the same things I did. Leave her out of this. You brought her into it when you made her choose between being your wife and admitting reality. I stared at him. Lucas lowered his voice. She signed because she knows. You're making her feel guilty for telling the truth. The elevator opened. I did not move. Careful, I said. You're starting to sound like you know what she feels. For once, he had no polished answer. I stepped inside and let the doors close between us. Back in Evelyn's office, she spread copies of Lucas's chronology across her desk. Look at the dates, she said. I've looked at them all morning. No. Look at how specific they are. Some entries included approximate times. Others named who had been nearby. The warehouse entry had the project, meeting, and exact date. Lucas had built the packet to show a pattern. Evelyn ran her finger down the page. He did us a favor. Daniel, standing behind her, said, "Explain. If we're trying to understand what happened around Dean's episodes, this gives us a cleaner chronology than our notes." She showed me one entry from early August. Lucas had written that I repeated a question after breakfast, then noted a conference call later that morning, where I sounded normal. Another entry described my fatigue one evening, but admitted I had worked a full day beforehand. He had included those details to look fair. They also gave us boundaries. I looked at the late July entry, then August, then the warehouse date. Marianne and I need to compare these with our home records. Daniel nodded. Records you already have lawful access to. Nothing clever. That evening, Marianne and I sat at our kitchen table with my laptop open between us. Our smart lock account still held access history. My code, Marianne's. The cleaning service, Lucas's emergency code. We had given it to him years earlier after a pipe burst while we were out of town. I read down the dates. Most meant nothing. Then Marianne touched the screen. Dean. I followed her finger. One entry showed Lucas's emergency code, opening our front door. The date matched an episode in his packet. I checked our calendar. That afternoon, Marianne and I had been in Colorado Springs. Lucas had entered our empty house. Before you decide what that entry means, check the rest of them. Marianne kept her finger on Lucas's access code while I scrolled. Daniel had said the same thing over the phone 10 minutes earlier. One suspicious entry was not enough. Lucas had been our emergency contact for years. We had asked him to let plumbers in, move packages, and check the house when we traveled. So we went date by date. The first visit had a reason, a package delivery. The second matched a text from me asking Lucas to check a leak under the kitchen sink. Another fell on a Sunday when we had invited him for dinner. Most were ordinary. That mattered. If I ignored the innocent entries, I was no better than Lucas, building a story from selected facts. I had spent decades telling project managers that a schedule was only useful if it included the delays nobody wanted to admit. Evidence worked the same way. The entries that cleared Lucas belonged on the page beside the one that did not. Marianne seemed to understand what I was doing. Each time she found a harmless explanation, she wrote it down instead of skipping past it. Marianne read from our calendar while I compared the lock history. August 6th. We were home. August 12th. You asked him to move the patio furniture before the storm. Right. Then we reached August 21st. Lucas's emergency code opened our front door at 2:17 in the afternoon. No package notice. No repair appointment. No text from me. No message from Marianne. We had driven to Colorado Springs that morning for a project dinner and stayed overnight. I opened Lucas's chronology from the board packet. 2 days later, he had recorded that I repeated the same question during breakfast and seemed unusually tired before a conference call. Marianne leaned back. That still doesn't prove he touched your medication. I know. It proves he was here. I know. Saying it twice did not make the line feel any smaller. The next morning, Daniel sat with us in his office while we reviewed the smart lock data again. He had me export the account history directly from the homeowner portal and preserve the original file. No screenshots, as the only record, he said. Keep the source data. You sound disappointed I didn't print it and circle things in red. I've known you a long time, Dean. Marianne almost smiled. Daniel did not. Now tell me whether you have cameras. Exterior only, I said. Front door, garage, driveway, cloud storage? Some. We checked the dates. Most old footage had already rolled off the system. August 21st was near the edge of what remained, but a motion clip from the garage camera still existed. The video began with the driveway empty. Then Ashley's SUV pulled in. I stopped breathing for a second without meaning to. Lucas got out first. Ashley followed. She carried a paper pharmacy bag. Nothing else happened on camera that helped us. They entered through the garage. 28 minutes later, both came out. Ashley still had the bag, folded at the top. Lucas locked the door. That was it. No view of my kitchen. No view of my medication. No hand opening a pill organizer. I replayed the clip twice anyway. The pharmacy logo was too small to read clearly. Ashley never looked toward the camera. Lucas carried nothing when he entered, and nothing when he left. If someone had shown me that video without the recording, or the altered pill, I would have called it an ordinary visit from our son and daughter-in-law. Daniel paused the video. "This is opportunity," he said. "Nothing more." Marianne pointed at the bag. "She brought medication into our house." "She brought a pharmacy bag into your house," Daniel corrected. I looked at him. "You enjoy this?" "No. I enjoy keeping you from saying something a defense attorney can tear apart later." We saved the clip. By then, our private suspicion had crossed a line I was not willing to handle alone. The recording from the housewarming existed. The altered pill existed. My physician had documented the symptoms. Now we had an unexplained entry into our home and video showing Lucas and Ashley there with a pharmacy bag. Daniel arranged for us to make a formal report and turn over copies through the proper channel. The detective who met with us did not promise arrests. He did not promise that the case was even a case yet. He listened. The detective separated what we knew from what we suspected on different pages. He asked who had access to the house, who filled my organizer, what medications I took, who had handled the glass, where the tablet had been tested, and whether Lucas had ever threatened me directly. When Marianne mentioned the pharmacy bag, he asked whether we could identify the pharmacy from the footage. No. Then don't guess. That sounded familiar. Has he ever admitted changing medication? The detective asked. No. Has Ashley? No. He wrote something down. Then we build from what you actually have. I liked him immediately for the same reason I sometimes disliked Daniel. He did not give me the answer I wanted. He gave me the next step. Afterward, Marianne and I sat in the car outside the station. She kept both hands in her lap. Do we ask Ashley about the bag? Not yet. What about Lucas? I looked through the windshield at people crossing the parking lot. We tell him something smaller. Daniel approved the wording. That evening, Lucas called after I sent him a short message asking for 10 minutes. His voice came through sharp. What now? My doctor changed how I'm handling my medication. Silence. I'm using sealed pharmacy packs from now on. Why? Easier to track. Track what? What I take. Lucas breathed out through his nose. Dad, are you still trying to prove somebody did something to you? I'm trying to stop making mistakes. That answer seemed to please him. Good, he said. That's what everyone wants. I let the quiet stretch. Then he asked, So you're not using the weekly box anymore? Marianne, sitting beside me on the couch, looked up. I had not said weekly box. Lucas knew I used one. That was not secret information. He had seen it before. He had spent years in our house. Still, he had reached for the detail quickly. No, I said. Not for now. Probably smart. Probably. He changed the subject to the client issue from the board meeting, speaking as if the last 2 weeks had been a misunderstanding between professionals. When the call ended, Marianne said, You heard it. Yes. He asked about the box. He already knew I had one. So it means nothing? It means exactly what it means. He remembered it. Nothing more. Not yet. The investigators handled the next steps. Daniel made it clear we were not to start calling pharmacies, chasing credit card records, or pressuring anyone for information they had no obligation to give us. That restriction irritated me. It also kept the evidence cleaner. For a man used to signing a document and making 5 crews move by sunrise, waiting was its own kind of work. I could not call a pharmacy and demand a customer record because I owned a construction company. I could not tell a lender to hand over Ashley's purchases. Authority in one building did not follow me into every other system. At work, I did what I could control. The dual approval system stayed in place. Evelyn continued preserving the financial records. Lucas remained in his role, but new vendors and unusual transfers could not move through him alone. He hated that. I could tell from the way he stopped making jokes in meetings. Ashley was harder to read because she barely contacted me. She texted Marianne about ordinary things. A restaurant, a charity event, whether we were coming to dinner, no mention of the recording, no mention of the pharmacy bag. For 3 days, nothing changed. That stretch of normal contact was almost worse than open hostility. Marianne answered only what required an answer. I kept expecting either Lucas or Ashley to push, accuse, or demand something. Instead, the silence sat there and made every ordinary message feel rehearsed. Then Marianne's phone buzzed while we were eating breakfast. She looked at the screen and stopped halfway through lifting her coffee. What? It's Ashley. Marianne turned the phone toward me. The message was short. Can we talk without Dean there? No. Marianne looked up from Ashley's message. No, what? You're not meeting her alone in some parking lot because she suddenly decided she wants to talk. She asked to talk without you there. That's exactly why I don't like it. My wife set her coffee down. Dean, if she wanted to say this to both of us, she would have. That doesn't make it safe. It also doesn't make it a trap. Daniel's answer, when we called him, irritated both of us equally. Public place, he said. No promises, no threats. Marianne listens. She does not accuse Ashley of changing medication, and she does not bargain away a criminal investigation you don't control. Marianne chose a hotel cafe near Cherry Creek. I did not go. That mattered because what I knew afterward came from what Marianne told me, the messages she showed me, and what investigators later confirmed. I did not sit in the next booth. I did not hear Ashley's voice myself. When Marianne came home 90 minutes later, she left her purse on the kitchen counter and stood there without taking off her coat. What happened? She wants us to make this disappear. How? Ashley said Lucas could resign. Leave Holloway. Move away for a while. In exchange for what? Marianne gave a tired little laugh. For you, not turning this into something criminal. I pulled out a chair. What exactly did she say? Marianne sat across from me. She kept calling it a family problem. Said the company issue had gotten bigger than it was supposed to. She said Lucas was under pressure and made bad decisions. Did she say what decisions? No. Medication? She never used that word. What about the house? Marianne nodded. That came up. Ashley had admitted the development was failing. Not in clean numbers, but enough to confirm what Evelyn's records already suggested. Lucas had guarantees coming due. Partners were demanding money. The mansion could not be carried comfortably if his Holloway income disappeared. Marianne said Ashley spent several minutes talking around the numbers. She mentioned an extension that had not come through, a partner who wanted out, and a lender who was suddenly less patient. Every sentence made the problem sound temporary. Bad quarter, bad timing, bad market, never fraud, never theft. Then Ashley had said something that sounded almost proud. Lucas can fix it if people stop pushing him into a corner, Marianne had asked. People meaning Dean? Ashley did not answer that question. She said they needed time. Marianne told me. Time for what? She wouldn't say. What did she say exactly? Marianne looked down at her hands. She said, no one was supposed to get hurt. He just needed time. I sat back. It sounded like a confession. It was not. Not by itself. What came before that? I asked why Lucas was so desperate to get control of the company. And, she said, he thought, if he could keep things steady for a few months, the development would recover. So she tied control to the development. Yes. Did she admit taking company money? No. Did she admit touching my medication? No. Did she admit knowing about the recording? She said she wished I had never gone upstairs. That stopped me. Marianne saw it. I asked what she meant. She said the party was supposed to be one night where nobody talked about business. Convenient. I know. We called Daniel before doing anything else. He listened to Marianne repeat the conversation, word for word, as best she could. Useful, he said. That's it? I asked. What do you want me to call it? A crack. It may be. But don't turn. No one was supposed to get hurt into, I helped poison Dean. Those are not the same sentence. I rubbed my forehead. So we wait again. We let the people with legal authority keep building. 2 days later, the detective called. Investigators had obtained records through the proper process that connected a payment source controlled by Ashley to a pharmacy transaction involving the same medication identified from the tablet in my organizer. He was careful with every word. This does not establish who placed the tablet in your organizer. I know. It establishes a purchase connection. I know. Good. I was beginning to understand why Daniel liked him. There was more. With lawful access to preserved device data and account records, investigators had recovered messages between Lucas and Ashley. Nothing said poison Dad. Nothing said change the pills. The language was smaller. The box. The schedule. Another bad day. Buy us time. One exchange was dated the night before an episode Marianne had recorded. Ashley had written, "Is tomorrow still okay?" Lucas answered, "It has to be." He's asking about North Range again. Another message, sent several days later, was shorter. Ashley, "The box is back where it was." Lucas, "Good. Leave it alone now." The detective cautioned me immediately. "We are not interpreting that line for you yet." He did not need to. The word box had already been sitting in my house for weeks. I still refused to call it proof. But the distance between coincidence and pattern had narrowed enough that even I could feel it. My mouth went dry. "Can I see that?" "Your attorney will receive what can be shared at the appropriate stage," the detective said. "For now, understand that we are treating the timing seriously." When the call ended, I went straight to Evelyn. "Pull the North Range records from that date." She did. The day before the message exchange, I had emailed Evelyn about a transfer approval tied to one of the questionable vendors. I had asked for backup. The next morning, according to Lucas's own packet, I had been unusually tired and repeated myself during a conference call. Still not proof of causation. But the lines were getting closer together. Evelyn pulled up another screen. "There's something else." "What?" "One of the internal transfer approvals into the vendor network used Lucas's credentials. Could someone else have used them?" "Possible. But the access record ties the approval to his account and device session." "How much?" "Enough that I want the forensic accountant to finish tracing it before I give you a total." I nodded. "Preserve it." "Already done." By then, Lucas knew Ashley had met Marianne. He called me before dinner. "What did she tell you?" "Who?" "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Pretend you don't know exactly what I mean." His voice was different now, less polished. "Ashley is scared," Lucas said. "She says things when she's scared." "What things?" "You tell me." "I wasn't there." Silence. That was true, and he knew it. Lucas lowered his voice. "She handled the house stuff, the pharmacy stuff, bills, errands. If she did something stupid, that's not me." There it was. Not a confession. A separation. "You're already blaming your wife?" "I'm telling you not to build a story around me because she panicked." "What did she panic about?" He stopped. Too late. Lucas recovered quickly. "Your accusations. The audit. Police showing up asking questions. What do you think?" "I think you should talk to your lawyer." "You're my father. That hasn't stopped you from talking to mine." The line went quiet. When Lucas spoke again, the anger had flattened. "If you destroy me over this, you're not protecting the company. You're proving you always wanted control more than a son." I looked across the kitchen at Marianne. She had heard enough through the speaker. "Good night, Lucas." I ended the call. For a few hours, it looked as if Ashley might keep talking. She sent Marianne one more message, asking whether we would consider a private family agreement. Daniel told us not to respond, beyond saying counsel should handle anything formal. By the next afternoon, Ashley had retained her own attorney. The messages stopped. The shortcut closed. But the records did not. Late that same day, Evelyn called me into her office. On her screen was an internal transfer approval tied to the Shell vendor network. The authorization had been made from Lucas's company credentials. The date matched a transfer into North Range's financial chain. Evelyn turned the monitor toward me. "This is no longer just a vendor we can't explain." I read Lucas's name beside the approval line. For the first time, the financial motive was not sitting beside him. It was attached to his account. He used his own credentials? Evelyn nodded. Same account, same device session, same approval trail. I stared at the screen. For weeks, Everything around Lucas had lived in that miserable gray area between suspicious and provable. A phrase in a recording, a pharmacy bag, a visit to our empty house, an altered pill, messages that sounded ugly only when placed beside dates. This was different. The transfer approval belonged to the company. It sat inside systems Lucas used every day. Can anyone say he personally clicked it? I asked. Not from this alone, Evelyn said. But the approval came through his credentials, from a session tied to his company device, and the money moved into the same network we've been tracing. Daniel leaned against the table. Preserve it. Don't confront him. I looked at him. You say that like it's still a new idea. It becomes more important as the evidence gets better. Evelyn closed the record. There's something else you need to know. What? Lucas requested another board meeting. Of course he had. This time, the request was not framed as a temporary health precaution. Lucas wanted a formal discussion of executive fitness and operational control. The message to the board described continued uncertainty around my health, client concern, recent changes in vendor controls, and what he called leadership decisions driven by personal conflict. Personal conflict. That was one way to describe hearing your son discuss your death at his housewarming. What does he want? Marianne asked. Later that evening, when I showed her the request, to make the temporary safeguards permanent enough that I stop being the center of decision-making. Can he? Not by asking. Then why agree to the meeting? I looked at the printed request on our kitchen table. Because he wants his packet on the record. Marianne frowned. And you want him to use it? Yes. Daniel had not liked the idea at first. He liked it better after Evelyn explained why. Lucas had spent weeks documenting dates, people, mistakes, and episodes because he wanted the board to see a pattern. Every entry he presented would lock him into a version of when my problems happened and what he supposedly knew at the time. I did not need him to confess. I needed him to commit. 2 mornings later, we met in Evelyn's office with Daniel and the forensic accountant. No police files, no private pharmacy records, no investigative material the company had no right to use. Corporate evidence only. That line stayed bright. Evelyn laid out the preserved vendor records. Unauthorized approval rerouting. Suspicious vendor relationships. Shell entity connections. North Range exposure. Lucas's credentials on transfer approvals. And the deletion event. I looked up. What deletion event? A vendor folder disappeared from the shared system yesterday. My chair scraped the floor as I leaned forward. Which folder? Summit Project Advisory. Daniel's expression changed. Was it already preserved? Yes. Evelyn turned her laptop toward us. The forensic export from weeks earlier still contained the folder, document metadata, approval history, and linked records. Information technology logs showed the deletion happened after Lucas had learned the audit was expanding. Who deleted it? I asked. We're still tracing the action precisely. The access came through a permissions path connected to his division. Connected is not the same as him. I know. That answer made me trust the finding more. The missing folder did not save Lucas. It did something worse. It showed somebody had started cleaning. We moved to the chronology. This was the part that made the room feel different. Evelyn placed Lucas's board packet beside my medical timeline, the smart lock history, and the preserved audit requests I had sent before several episodes. Late July, I had asked about a vendor cost increase. The next day, a message between Lucas and Ashley mentioned the box and buying time. 2 days later, according to Lucas's own packet, I had been unusually tired. August, I asked for backup on North Range linked transfers. Lucas's emergency code opened our empty house. Soon after, his packet recorded another episode, September. I raised a subcontractor invoice question. Then came the warehouse dizziness. Not every date matched. Some had no connection at all. That mattered. Evelyn marked those too. If we only show the matches, he'll say we built the pattern backward, she said. So we show everything. Yes. Daniel tapped Lucas's packet. And remember what this proves. Not poisoning, not criminal guilt. It proves Lucas has been presenting himself as a neutral observer of Dean's health, while financial records raise separate questions about his own conduct. That distinction felt narrow. It was also enough for the board. Marianne had been quiet through most of the meeting. When Daniel asked what she planned to say if the board questioned her again, she looked at me before answering. "The same thing I said last time." "What is that?" he asked. "I saw Dean have episodes. I believed something might be medically wrong. I signed the acknowledgement because of that." Daniel nodded. "And now? Now I know there is an altered pill, a recording, access to our house, and things investigators are looking at. But I am not going to tell the board. Those episodes never happened." I said, "You don't have to protect me." "I'm not." Her voice was flat. "I'm protecting the truth from both of you." That one stayed with me. By Friday, Lucas had begun pressing managers for statements supporting his request. Nothing openly improper. Questions. Has Dean seemed slower? Have decisions been delayed? Have the new controls hurt projects? He was building again. The same habit. Record everything that helps. Shape everything that does not. One senior manager forwarded Evelyn a message Lucas had sent, asking whether the dual approval system was creating unnecessary exposure because of Dean's personal concerns. Evelyn printed it and added it to the governance file. "He keeps giving us paperwork," she said. "He thinks paperwork is armor." Daniel looked at me. "And what do you think?" "I think armor gets heavy." That afternoon, a vendor contact who had been cooperating with the forensic accountant suddenly stopped returning calls. Not illegal, not dramatic, just gone. An email followed saying he had been advised not to discuss past invoices without counsel. I read it twice. Lucas got to him. Daniel shook his head. "You don't know that. Somebody did. You still don't know who." So we kept the email, nothing more. The temptation to turn every movement into proof was strongest now, because the shape of the whole scheme had finally become visible. That was when mistakes happened. I went home early. Marianne was at the dining table with Lucas's old continuity document and her handwritten notes. "You're rereading everything? I want to know exactly what I can say without making it sound better than it was." I sat across from her. "Do you regret signing it?" "Yes." "Do you regret being worried?" "No." That answer came fast. "I wish I had told you. I wish I had asked harder questions. But you were having episodes, Dean. I'm not going to pretend I imagined them just because Lucas may have used them." I nodded. "That's what you should tell the board." She studied me. "You really want the meeting?" "No." "But you're going?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because if Lucas wants to put me on trial as a chief executive, I want him to bring every page." The meeting was scheduled for Monday. Over the weekend, I did not rehearse a speech. I reviewed dates, authority, records, what the board could decide, what it could not, what belonged to law enforcement, what belonged to Holloway Construction. By Sunday night, the piles on my desk were smaller than they had been all month. Not because there was less evidence, because we finally knew which room each piece belonged in. The board would see governance failures, financial records, preserved approvals, and Lucas's own chronology. Investigators would handle medication, pharmacy records, and criminal intent. Keeping those lines separate no longer felt like caution. It felt like control. Monday morning, I arrived before 8. The conference room door was already open. Lucas sat at one end of the table with a thick black folder in front of him. The label was printed in block letters. Dean Holloway, Fitness for Duty. I placed Evelyn's preserved audit file at the opposite end. Lucas looked at it, then at me. His smile returned. "Let's finally settle this." I pulled out my chair. "That's why I'm here." "Go ahead," I said. Lucas opened his black folder. The board sat in the same seats as before. Robert Keene at the center. Helen Ward 2 chairs down. Evelyn had the preserved audit file open beside her laptop. Daniel sat along the wall with outside corporate counsel. Marianne was behind me. Lucas began calmly. He walked the board through my duplicate email, the missed meeting, the warehouse footage, and the dates he had collected. He referred to the client concern. He mentioned the temporary safeguards already in place. Then he lifted Marianne's acknowledgement. This isn't about taking anything from my father, Lucas said. It's about protecting employees from uncertainty. I let him finish. Every page, every date, every conclusion. Robert turned to me. Dean, the incidents happened. Lucas looked up. I continued. The duplicate email happened. The warehouse dizziness happened. Marianne signed that acknowledgement because she was worried about me. I'm not asking anyone in this room to pretend otherwise. Lucas leaned back. For 1 second, I saw the relief in his posture. Then Evelyn stood. Before the board considers permanent changes to executive authority, it needs to review a separate governance issue. Lucas's head turned toward her. She connected her laptop to the screen. No police records. No pharmacy files. No criminal accusation. Only Holloway Construction. Unauthorized approval rerouting. Vendor controls changed without board authority. Suspicious payments through Summit Project Advisory and related entities. Transfers into a network tied to North Range Development Holdings. Lucas's credentials on internal approvals. The preserved folder deleted after the audit expanded. Each item appeared with dates and source records. Lucas interrupted. You're presenting an audit that started because Dad decided I was guilty. Evelyn did not raise her voice. The preserved records predate several of his accusations. Credentials can be compromised. Yes, you just admitted that. I admitted possibility. I did not erase the records. Robert lifted one hand. Let her finish. Evelyn showed the board the failed development exposure and the financial dependence tied to Lucas's position. No accusation that he had stolen every dollar. No dramatic total thrown at the wall, just enough to show motive and risk. Then she placed his fitness packet beside the timeline. This document is Lucas's, Evelyn said. I know what it is, he replied. So do we. She aligned the dates. My questions about vendor costs. My requests for backup. North Range-related transfers. The episodes Lucas had documented. Smart lock entries were not displayed as criminal evidence, but the corporate chronology alone showed something the board had not seen before. Lucas's health narrative had grown alongside the financial pressure inside his division. Robert leaned forward. Lucas, when did you first become concerned about your father's fitness? Late July. And when did you first know North Range had serious exposure? Lucas hesitated. I don't remember the exact date. Evelyn slid a preserved email onto the screen. His answer to a lender from that same period. He had known. Helen Ward looked at him. You were asking this board to rely on your neutral judgment while you had a personal financial interest in changing operational control. That's not fair. No, Helen said. It's relevant. Lucas turned toward me. This is what you wanted. A public execution. I did not answer him. Robert did. This is a board meeting. Marianne was asked to speak next. She stood beside the wall rather than joining us at the table. I signed the acknowledgement because Dean was having episodes, she said. I believed there might be a medical problem. Lucas nodded slightly, as if she had finally returned to his side. Marianne continued. I still believe those episodes happened. I also know I heard my son upstairs at his housewarming, talking about what would happen after Dean was gone. Lucas's chair moved. Daniel raised his hand before he could speak. Marianne did not describe investigative conclusions. She only described what she personally heard, the glass she took from my hand, and why she began preserving dates. Robert looked at Lucas. Did you say those words? Lucas stared at the table. I was talking about estate planning. Did you say once the old man's gone? That sounds worse out of context. Did you say it? Yes. The room became very quiet. Not because he confessed to a crime, because he finally stopped controlling the wording. The board recessed for 20 minutes. Lucas left first. I stayed. When Robert called us back, the decision came in clean language. Lucas was suspended from his officer role pending completion of the financial investigation. His signing authority was revoked. Existing dual signature safeguards around my major decisions would remain temporarily until my medical review was completed. I stayed chief executive. Ownership did not change. Nobody took Lucas's 5% shares. Nobody declared him guilty of a crime. The board simply removed his ability to keep using the company while questions about his conduct were unresolved. Lucas listened without moving. Then he looked at me. "You chose strangers over your son." "No," I said. "You brought this to the board." He stood. Security did not drag him out. He collected his folder, handed over his company badge, and walked away under his own power. That mattered. His fall started with his own feet, using records he had created himself. The criminal investigation continued after the meeting. Weeks passed. Investigators worked through the altered pill, the payment connection tied to Ashley, the smart lock records, the exterior footage, and the preserved messages between them. Lucas tried to separate himself from the medication. Ashley, through her lawyer, began cooperating in limited ways. Neither of them walked away clean. By the time formal charges came, the evidence had not appeared overnight. It had been built piece by piece. Medication tampering, conspiracy-related allegations, financial fraud tied to the company records. The exact counts belonged to prosecutors, not me. I stopped asking Daniel for predictions. He stopped giving me lectures I had not requested. By December, the financial damage had become visible outside conference rooms. Without Lucas's officer income and company access, North Range could not keep pretending its problems were temporary. Lenders tightened. Partners filed claims. The mansion that had been full of champagne and music in September went on the market under pressure. It did not vanish the next morning. It emptied slowly. First the catered parties, then the landscaping crew, then the luxury cars in the driveway, finally the listing sign. Ashley's cooperation helped her position, but it did not erase her role. The pharmacy payment trail remained. So did the messages. So did the visit to our house. Lucas and Ashley stopped presenting a united front once each had separate counsel. That part required no revenge from me. They did it themselves. One afternoon, Daniel called and said Lucas wanted to speak with me. I accepted. The call came through from his attorney's office. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Lucas said, "Whatever you think I did, I'm still your son." His voice sounded smaller without a conference room around it. I looked at the pill organizer on my desk. "How many times?" Silence. "How many times did you change my pills?" "I didn't." "How many times?" "Dad." I waited. Nothing. The line eventually ended without an answer. I did not post bail. I did not call a prosecutor. I did not ask a lender for mercy. For most of Lucas's life, every disaster had ended with me finding a way to soften the landing. Not this one. At Holloway Construction, we changed too. I brought in stronger independent oversight, expanded the board's role, and began a formal plan for professional executive management and employee profit sharing with a path toward broader ownership over time. Not overnight, not as a gesture, as structure. My medical review eventually cleared me to continue working with the safeguards we had already adopted and a better medication system. The first morning after that, Marianne set a new pill organizer on our kitchen counter. Fresh plastic, clean labels, nothing hidden. I picked up my phone and opened the Smart Lock app. Lucas's emergency code was still there. For a moment, my thumb stayed above the screen. Then I remembered the August entry, the empty house, and the garage footage. I pressed delete. The screen asked me to confirm. Marianne stood beside me. I pressed it again. Access revoked. A small message appeared. That was all. I closed the app, shut the lid on the organizer, and left both of them on the counter. When a betrayal comes from your own family, the hardest lesson is that love cannot be used as a substitute for evidence, boundaries, or accountability. You can love your child and still refuse to protect that child from the consequences of deliberate choices. You can remember birthdays, school plays, first jobs, and all the years when that person depended on you, while also recognizing that the adult standing in front of you is responsible for what he or she does now. Family history explains a relationship. It does not erase responsibility. This story also shows why you should not ignore small changes simply because each one can be explained away by itself. A strange financial decision, an unexplained visit, a troubling conversation, or an unusual problem with medication may seem inconclusive alone, The responsible response is not to accuse first and investigate later. It is to preserve what you actually know. Write down dates. Protect records. Seek qualified help and separate suspicion from proof. That difference matters. When you stay disciplined, you make it harder for fear, anger, or manipulation to control your decisions. You should also be careful about surrendering authority simply because someone claims to be acting for your own good. Concern can be genuine, but concern can also be used as leverage. If your health, finances, business, property, or legal rights are being questioned, independent professionals and documented procedures can protect everyone involved. A responsible safeguard is very different from quietly handing control to the person who benefits from your weakness. Asking questions is not stubbornness. Requiring transparency is not cruelty. Another lesson is that revenge does not have to mean destroying someone with your own hands. Sometimes, the most powerful response is to stop rescuing the person who keeps creating the disaster. You do not have to lie for them, pay their debts, silence witnesses, pressure professionals, or use your influence to make consequences disappear. You can step aside and let documented choices meet lawful consequences. That is not abandonment. It is accountability. And if you are a parent, this may be the most uncomfortable question of all. How many times have you softened a landing because you believed protecting your child was the same as loving your child? At what point does repeated rescue stop being compassion and start teaching someone that consequences are always negotiable? You may also recognize Marianne's position. What would you do if the person you loved was being harmed by the child you raised together? Could you admit that you had once believed the wrong explanation without rewriting the past to make yourself look wiser? Sometimes integrity means saying, "This is what I saw then, and this is what I know now." If you have ever had to set a boundary with someone you still loved, what finally convinced you that the boundary was necessary? And if a member of your own family betrayed your trust this deeply, would you try to save the relationship, or would you let accountability come first? Share what you think, because for many families, the hardest decision is not whether love remains. It is deciding what love is no longer allowed to excuse.